Hello. So I felt somewhat inspired this morning to talk about vampires. I always had a fascination as a child with vampires. The mythological vampires that we so commonly can associate with Dracula and the fanged teeth, and the fact that they prefer to sleep during the day in their coffins and come out at night to feed their desirous lust and thirst for human blood. And there is a commonality or an energy at the moment which feels very vampiric around us. The vampire will want to place its fangs, just like a snake, into your jugular, into your artery, and prick you, and ultimately draw blood from you to feed on. Blood is sacred. Your blood is absolutely sacrosanct. Your blood contains huge amounts of chi, energy. It contains your ancestry, your DNA, your memory, your soul memory. Your blood is so precious that anything parasitic that wants to exploit, manipulate, and coerce and ultimately corrupt the purity of an ancestral line, or let's call it in general, a humanity, will always go after its blood. And parasites, vampires, feed off your blood in various ways. Okay, you've probably heard about energy vampires, people that ultimately latch in and feed off your energy by triggering you in certain ways, or by ultimately draining you if you haven't got the correct energetic boundaries. There are the parasitic entities that want to control, coerce, and ultimately corral you into a corner where they can exploit your energy physically, mentally, and emotionally. And there are the parasitic entities and vampires that enjoy causing harm and enjoy and get some sense of power and control through the corruption of innocence and purity. And none of us are pure, right? We live in a very corrupted humanity right now. Ancestral lines are heavily burdened with huge amounts of negative karma. And whatever the belief system is, whatever you believe in, it all started at some point. Okay, the corruption started at some point. But it's important to understand that and reiterate that your blood is sacred. And when you go back to the ethos of the vampire hides in the shadows. The vampire can't stand the light of truth, ultimately, shining on it. It will dissolve. It will disintegrate. The vampire ultimately is an empty shell, a soulless being that exists solely to feed and gain its energy source from others who are connected are more deeply connected through the bridge of their souls to spirit, to God, to the source of all life, to Christ, whatever you want to call it. And vampires, ultimately, their aim is to, it's like malware in a computer, a virus in a computer. A virus's job is to propagate and ultimately replicate and expand and ultimately corrupt the system that it's got into. You know, we're supposedly suffering from a virus, an endemic now, probably. Let's call it an endemic. Let's get a bit more positive about the whole situation. This virus will want to integrate itself into its host. It doesn't want to kill its host, but it wants to turn it enough so that it will be submissive and subservient to the parasite, to the virus. And that's what vampires do. They'll jab you with their 2 teeth, fangs. They'll double jab you, and they will want to turn you. Maybe not turn you fully into a full-blown vampire, but turn you enough to become submissive, a submissive food source for continuation of a selfish, narcissistic agenda. Have you ever noticed Dracula? Extremely narcissistic, you know? Loved himself quite a lot. I draw this analogy and this metaphor because I'm deeply concerned that the blood of our species will eventually become so contaminated and changed beyond repair that the effect on the humanoid, the physical being, will be such that at some level there will be an ultimate disconnection. The bridge between the physical, the soul and the spirit will become ever more difficult to tap into. There will be an entropic pull, and it's happening already, into pure materialism. And that's exactly where the vampire wants you. The vampire wants you living in this fearful state of materialistic submissiveness, which ultimately doesn't serve the soul, doesn't serve the growth, doesn't allow the truth of the spirit to shine through, to shine that light of truth through, to shine on to the parasite, to shine on to the vampire. So there's a lot going on right now, and we have to dig deeply into our feelings, our psychology, our subconscious mind, our underworld, to understand where we are still gripped by fear, where fear still has a very tight hold on us, where fear is ultimately the root of other aspects of our psychology and egos that propagate and build strongholds within us to keep us subjugated. And like Yoda said in Star Wars, you know, fear is the path to the dark side. Fear typically leads to anger. Anger leads to hate. And hate leads to suffering. How many of us on this planet right now, when we're looking honestly within us, are suffering? Suffering because we're seeing deep in our souls, not necessarily at a conscious level, but deep within our souls, we are feeling a degeneration, we are feeling an entropy, a chaos starting to occur, schism. And maybe it's supposed to happen, I'm not saying we need to change anything, but we need to dig deep to understand the forces that are in play so that we can spiritually navigate through our lives in this very difficult time for humanity in a way which brings more light and truth. Okay? More light and truth to this virus. And the virus isn't the virus you think I'm talking about. There's a deeper virus within us. These vampires, they exist within us and they exist around us. As within, so without. We have to be very cognizant of that. We have to be very mindful and aware of where we are gripped. Where we are gripped by fear. Are we choosing fear or are we choosing love? Or are we trying to ignore it all? When you ignore something, the etymology of ignore could be turned into ignorance. Yeah, you bury your head in the sand. But ignorance is bliss, right? If you don't know something, then you can't be affected by what's potentially coming. You can't be affected by so much emotionally or mentally by the insidiousness of the forces that are in play. Not so much insidiousness, they're just being what they're being, right? They're doing what they're doing. They're designed to create entropy. They're designed to create chaos and destruction and death, which is all part of nature's cycle, right? But how we navigate through it is important. And ignorance is no excuse. Ignorance is actually resistance. When you're ignoring something, you're resisting it. You're not facing it, you're placing a wall or you're placing an energetic barrier. And you can't ignore something unless you're aware of it, right? So if you're ignoring something, you're saying, well, I'm aware of it, but I'm choosing to ignore it. All right? So you're resisting. What you resist persists. You're giving it energy. You're feeding it. A more appropriate term potentially would be, I'm aware of what's going on, but I choose not to place my energy or attention on it. But I'm hyper aware of what's going on. There's an observation. There's an observation, but I'm not feeding it. It's like crossing a road, right? If you're gripped by fear, you'd shut your eyes and try and run across a road and boom, probably be hit by a car, right? I'm just ignoring the cars. Bang. Splat. You know there's a danger. You're aware there's a danger when you're crossing a road, right? You're aware that there's cars and buses and whatnot happening all around you. And you know that if you get hit by one of these things that it's probably going to end you, right? What gets you across the road? Is it fear? No. It's wisdom. Wisdom and awareness gets you across the road. So to ignore something means you're still feeding a fear. And that fear is deep. It's deep in the subconscious. There are many faces of fear that I've had to face in my life and still am battling with and becoming more and more aware of within myself. And I'll probably do another video or maybe even a workshop on that through my own personal experience. And I would encourage you to seek out the vampire. Be a vampire hunter. Are vampires demons? Are vampires egos? What are they? It doesn't matter. They're parasitic. They want to feed off you. They're everywhere. Okay? The other way to kill a vampire is with a wooden stake. This is actually in Nepalese shamanism called a kila. Okay? And there's various rituals and mantras that you can use to use this tool, this object, to help with healing and do various things. But a stake through the heart of a vampire ends the vampire. The heart is empty within a vampire, and it will want to be filled with your light, your love, your trust, your energy, your blood. Don't give it to him. Don't give it to him. Hunt out your inner vampires. Hunt out where you're parasitically feeding your fears. How you're doing that, be it consciously or subconsciously, meditate on it. Understand yourself, because these are ripe opportunities in these times to really go deep and really understand the machinations and workings of the external reality that we face, which ultimately mirrors the internal reality that we are all struggling with. So try not to allow yourself to be turned. Okay? Fear and love are always dancing together. Okay? And fear will want to control the dance. Are you going to allow it to within you? Are you going to allow the fear to take over and make you feel like potentially there is no light left? Nothing worth fighting for? That's the vampire's job. Turn you just enough so your head goes down and you just accept your lot and act as a food source. Somewhat esoteric. Some watching this video might think, I think Richard's gone mad now, talking about vampires. But try to see beyond the words. Try to see beyond the mythology and try to see and understand what's going on in the world and how our blood, how sacred, our sacred blood is potentially being corrupted and will continue to be corrupted if we allow it to. Have a good day. And don't forget your kila.